tonight, pubs in peril.
I couldn't believe it. The road, as you can see, is busy. Traffic was going by. They literally just tore it down.
Communities battling to save their boozers.
It's a roller coaster of emotions, from tense, hopeful, ecstatic, all in a very short period of time.
And the seemingly irresistible rise of new British beer.
Oh my lord!
Yes.
Looks like Coca-Cola.
But it's a beer!
Good evening and welcome to the Tonight programme. Pubs are part of the very fabric of British life and contribute tens of billions each year to our country's economy. Yet it's estimated each week around 20 of them close their doors forever. But Britain's craft beer industry is flourishing, with on average 2 new breweries opening every day. Tonight, Jonathan Maitland asks whether we're in the throes of a great British pub revolution.
Each month, this merry band of sea shanty singers get together down at their local boozer. There's a strong tradition of song and music in many of our pubs. And for me, tonight's gathering shows why they can often be such memorable places. The Great British Pub. At its best, a unique place for sharing quality time with family and friends.
It's like a very nice community thing. It's a community sing-around. Singing brings people together. Singing in the pub, doubly so.
It's just a nice way to spend an evening. You come in and you feel comfortable and it kind of feels homey, and that's what I love about this pub in particular.
It's all about creating a great sense of community here. I love it, the staff love it, and as you can hear, all the customers love it.
This local is clearly a living, thriving thing. But in the past decade, the UK has lost 1 in 5 of its pubs. Some are converted into convenience stores, others closed and revamped into flats.
Now, the closure of pubs is one thing, but a number are actually being demolished. That is, the buildings are being destroyed. This was a pub once. Look at it now. And it wasn't any old pub, it was a building of great historical significance. How on earth did that happen?
It happened in April last year. They had diggers lined up here one morning, and they told the people working in the pub they're going to do some work at the back of the pub. So the pub was empty that day. The diggers went in and just smashed the pub down.
That's dangerous, mate. That's ridiculous.
The road, as you can see, is busy. Traffic was going by. They literally just tore it down.
The Carlton Tavern had been sold by its owners to a developer who was keen to maximise the potential of the land by building new apartments.
I couldn't believe it. If I'd been here on that day, I would have gone in and stopped them physically. I would have laid in front of that bulldozer, the JCB, and stopped them. And done my best as part of this community to do that. We felt so strongly about this. This pub was built after the First World War in 1920. It was the only building left standing around here from the Second World War.
It's ironic, isn't it, that it survives the German bombs.
Yeah.
And then developers move in and smash it to bits.
Yes.
And were people upset about?
Yeah, very upset. Immediately we started a campaign to rebuild it.
And locals were on strong ground because the planning authority, Westminster Council, had not given permission for the pub to be knocked down. And Historic England was in the process of listing it. I met up with one of their experts in another 1920s London pub, which gives a good idea of what the Carlton Tavern would have been like.
Why was the Carlton Tavern ripe for listing then?
Well, it's a good example of an improved pub. So this is the changes that were happening in the interwar period to make them more acceptable and open to families and women. So we can see here that the facade had a really sort of historic character to make it feel welcoming and comforting and familiar kind of architectural language here. And we see that in the gable and the paned windows. So familiar, old-fashioned features.
And lovely signage.
It is lovely, and it's so evocative of history too, because it tells us immediately this is a pub, it tells us who the brewer was, and it also says what it was advertising, so I love that there's sparkling ales at the front door.
It's so obviously a piece of history, isn't it?
Definitely, beautiful materials. And what's also was really lovely about this pub is the luncheon room at the back. So it unusually had a very large hall where food was served with a lovely timber truss roof above the space. So a really welcoming space. And what was interesting about that was that it was encouraging the serving and the consumption of food. So again, more inclusive of families and not just about drinking in the pub, a wider range of functions.
I don't understand how someone can send in the bulldozers.
It was a really much-loved community building, so it's even more of a shame because that asset is no longer there.
Over the past 18 months, Westminster Council has battled the site's developer, CLTX Limited, all the way through to a public inquiry, and eventually this autumn secured a victory. CLTX Limited, based in Israel, has been ordered to rebuild the pub brick by brick within 2 years.
It's really sad to see it now as a pile of rubble still, but we're optimistic that it can and will be rebuilt. We have drawings, we have photographs, and we have skilled people who can put it back together and help to restore it as a much-loved community asset that will, in future, have special architectural interest as well.
CLTX Limited, the developer, told us it was committed to reinstating the pub as an accurate replica and as an amenity for the local community. And for the loyal locals of the Carlton Tavern, they'll be happy to eventually get their pub back.
Isn't it great, like in a year or two's time, you'll be sitting there having a pint and it'll be restored.
It'll be one for Londoners, because we see this in London now all over the place, in other parts of the country. Just do what they want, and it'll be great. And it'll be great for the community.
Now, although many pubs are struggling and beer sales are relatively flat, one sector is thriving. There are now more than 1,700 independent craft breweries in the UK. So I've come here to find out what a craft beer actually is and why it's become so popular.
Brewdog has been the UK's fastest growing out-of-home food and drink company for the past few years.
Cheers.
It specialises in selling its own craft beer and some of the best offerings from the UK's ever-growing pool of thriving independent breweries.
Brewdog is definitely, by some, regarded as one of the brands that started that craft beer revolution in the UK. So we did set out with a very punk aesthetic to have the same sort of disdain for mass-marketed beer as the old-school punks did for pop music.
And interestingly, this is a people's beer company, isn't it? Because you raised £26 million through crowdfunding. Is that part of the success story, do you think?
100%. We now have 50,000 investors worldwide. They're buying our beer, they're enjoying it in our bars, they care about what we do, they give us feedback and they share it with their friends.
Craft beer is going through a period of phenomenal growth. In the last 3 years, we've seen over 2,500 new brands enter the marketplace. And it's really because it gives the customer a sense of discovery. People want to go out, try something new, and be the first one to come back and introduce their friends to something different.
But what's at the heart of this apparent revolution?
Thank you.
Perhaps it's a big change in the product itself, and so, purely in the interests of research...
Cheers!
I've agreed to sample some revolutionary beers. And I'm in good hands, because Sarah is one of the UK's leading beer sommeliers.
The smell that you'll get from this beer, if you just give it a sniff, you'll see that it's got a lot of sort of fruity aromas, so there's a lot of mango and passion fruit and lychee.
And actually, to me, it's a cross between a beer and a liqueur, almost.
It is, exactly. So the purpose of this beer is to brew something that tastes amazing, but at the same time, you wouldn't drink huge amounts of it. We don't make beer for the purposes of getting drunk.
Well then.
So it's still got plenty of bitterness there. It's
Very light.
It is still super light, but it's super, super citrusy, a little bit grassy, and perfect for summer.
Do you know what I really get with these beers is you don't sit there and neck it. You taste it.
Absolutely.
Because it's to be appreciated, not glugged. Oh my lord!
Yes. So
looks like Coca-Cola.
It's quite dark. They've actually added 7 different types of coffee at 3 different points in the brewing process. It's innovation and experimentation and seeing how you can push the boundaries of beer and create something new. Okay. Try it and see. So it's a lot like a coffee.
It tastes like a coffee.
It does taste like a coffee.
It's a coffee.
But it's a beer. There's actually been some studies into what the perfect amount of alcohol versus coffee is, because alcohol releases your inhibitions and coffee wakes you up.
Well, I feel very awake and quite uninhibited.
I'll say no more.
In some areas of the pub market, we're definitely seeing revolution. I think in other areas, we're definitely seeing evolution. And both of those together are good for business and they're good for the customer.
And while many brewers are embracing the revolution, so increasingly are local communities. Here in Warwickshire, the New Inn has served thirsty locals and travellers for over 250 years. But this summer, its owners, Enterprise Inns, closed its doors and decided to put it up for sale. It's a move that's galvanised the village of Norton Lindsay into action.
When the pub closed in July, it was a shock, and there was a numbness crept in. It hit the community very hard.
The pub, it's very important to us because it brings companionships to the village, and it is the place where we can meet people, new people who are coming to the village. And I love this pub.
No other pub company or private landlord was interested in running the New Inn. Villagers feared it would be demolished to make way for housing. But the local parish council had successfully applied to have the pub listed as an asset of community value. That means the villagers have a chance to buy their beloved boozer. Over the summer, they started a campaign, called themselves the Salvation Squad, and sent out a survey to find out what locals wanted.
Right, I've got a couple of plans that we can have a look at.
Well, we found that people wanted facilities for the pub, which included a shop, a cafe, and also parcel drop-off. I mean, encompassing all of those things really does make it a true hub of the community for the village and a reason to come in on a daily basis.
The Salvation Squad has agreed a deal to buy the pub, but they need to raise just over £300,000 with a deadline just days away.
We've set up both a crowdfunding site, but we've also set up a share option. It's a roller coaster of emotions, from tense, hopeful, ecstatic, all in a very short period of time.
The villagers have been checking out local suppliers.
This is the hop room, and I'm sure you've heard...
Including an award-winning brewery just a few miles away.
You can sort of pick up the smell of a wet pine forest, which is pleasant.
We feel passionate about making sure that we're using local produce, because the pub's been here since 1750. It's about heritage, but it's about locality as well, and I think it would make sense.
Beer's a relatively simple product, and we think it's been around for about 9,000 years.
I'm delighted that we're mounting a campaign to save our pub. I've got confidence that the village will make it. I wish it with all my heart.
I think what the New Inn are doing is brilliant. There's definitely a growth in villages taking over their community pubs. And the reason for that is they're trying to take the pub back to what it has always been, and that's the fulcrum of the local area. So we're seeing pubs bring in offers such as the post office, they're putting in coffee shops, child play areas, even in some cases libraries. And it's all about making sure that it's not about profit, but it's about providing the community a place to meet and a community a place to gather.
We'll come back later to find out how the villagers get on with trying to save their pub. Now, the government is also getting involved in what's happening to our locals. This summer, it introduced a new piece of legislation called the Pubs Code, which could break the centuries-old tradition of the so-called tied pub. When a pub is tied, a publican pays rent to the company which owns the pub and has to buy beer at a much higher price from that same company.
If a tied publican was to go free of tie, they would immediately free up a considerable amount of profit. They could reinvest that money back into the infrastructure of the pub. They could reduce the price of a pint. If the publican chose to go down that route, they would access a much wider variety of products.
A couple of years back, the Federation of Small Businesses conducted a survey of tied pub tenants, asking if they'd opt to go free of tie if they could, and over 80% said they would. Now, under the new legislation, a tenant can apply to pay a fair rent and be free to buy drink from wherever he or she wants. But the big pub-owning companies have resisted this change and, according to some campaigners, are not playing fair.
The vast majority of the profit that the pub companies make comes through the beer tie, and effectively the legislation breaks that. I think it would be fair to say they're fighting tooth and nail to make sure that this legislation doesn't do them permanent damage. It's quite soul-destroying at times, because we are seeing people who are effectively giving up because of the resistance that they are getting from their pub companies.
Pub tenant Trudy Thomas would love to be free of tie.
I've been here at the Rifleman's for 12 years. My mum and dad were always in pub trade, and I think once it's in you, it's there, isn't it? So, and I just really do enjoy it. Good fun, a lot of banter, and we do have a real good laugh. You're doing the Saturday, aren't you?
The Rifleman's is one of around 1,600 pubs owned by the brewer Marston's, but according to Trudy, nearby pubs run directly by them are on a better deal than her.
It means that competitors can sell their pint for maybe 30 to 40p cheaper than myself, and it makes it tough because customers can't understand why I'm charging extra when it's maybe the same brewery that we're dealing with.
For Trudy, the stress of her struggling business is a heavy weight to bear.
You're just constantly worrying. I always check my bank balance and say, let's see what we haven't got, so I know how much I can order. I want to try and sort it. What did you want to drink then?
Over the summer, Trudy applied to Marston's to break her tie with them and pay a fair rent. But the deal she was offered came as a big shock.
They wanted double my rent, which would be £46,000. They wanted a security bond of £23,000. It would be a new agreement, so apparently there would be costs from solicitors, which I would have to pay both sides. If they know you're struggling now, where would they think you'd get £23,000 for your for that deposit? Not affordable at all.
Marston's told us they're waiting for an assessment of Trudy's case by the pub's code adjudicator, and we'll meet him later. An influential parliamentary committee has been looking at how the pub's code is working, and its chairman isn't happy.
It's a real concern to us that in many respects some of the decisions that are being made will double rents and put in unfair practices in relation to their contractual arrangements. It will probably put them out of business, and they're on very tight margins as it is. It's really important that power doesn't just lie in the hands of very large pub companies, but that there's a level playing field between pub companies who want to get a rent and tenants who want to see their pubs thrive.
The British Beer and Pub Association, which represents the big pubcos, told us that because existing tied agreements have higher beer prices to allow lower rents and other benefits, in general, free of tied deals will inevitably mean higher rents for tenants. They said their members are committed to working within the spirit of the new legislation, and negotiations over free of tie agreements are carried out in good faith. I arranged to meet the new pubs code adjudicator, Paul Newby. It's his first national TV interview since the code went live. He's currently dealing with nearly 80 cases of tenants who are in dispute with their pub co.
The worry is that the big, powerful pub companies, they're not acting in the spirit of the legislation. Is that a situation that you recognise?
This is the law, and I expect pub companies to comply with it. And where there is unfairness,
I expect us to address that to make sure that pubs can thrive.
But how confident are you that you can make it fairer?
Well, we have to wait and see what issues come to us and deal with them properly. In talking about the market rent only option, there's a mechanism to determine what a fair free of tie rent would be.
But Mr Newby's independence has been called into question by some campaigners. This is because he used to work for a company called Fleurettes, which specialises in valuing pubs and derives a significant chunk of its earnings from the pub-owning companies. And he still has a continued financial interest in Fleurettes.
It's almost like Manchester United are playing Hartlepool United. But the referee, who's meant to be completely impartial, has stakes in the sponsor of Man United. That can't be seen to be fair. And I think people will recognise that actually that sense of when you make a decision, when you blow the whistle as a referee, you have to be impartial.
Landlady Trudy Thomas's case is now under consideration by Mr Newby. She's had a letter from him in which he clearly outlines his potential conflict of interest.
Doesn't give me confidence whatsoever. You just feel like, oh, you've lost anyway. I feel like it is back to the beginning again, back to square one.
I asked the question to both pub companies and tenants. I asked them, do you have confidence that Mr Newby is impartial? And it was really telling. The pub company said, yes, we have no problems at all. The tenants universally said, no, we don't. We have concerns. That in itself, I think, is very damning. And that shows how the perception of a lack of impartiality is there when it comes to Mr Newby's role.
I have a financial interest in Fleurettes. Yes, that's declared in our register of interests. And those in government who appointed me, you know, don't see that as a bar to my ability to do this job fairly and impartially.
But can you see that it's difficult for you to maintain the appearance and perception of independence in the eyes of the people who matter, the tenants?
I've been out a lot in this role. I've met a lot of tenants, and many of the ones I've met are very supportive of me in this role. So I believe that there's a big body of people out there who believe I can do this job.
So you're not considering your position then?
No, I'm getting on with the job.
Meanwhile, back in Warwickshire, fundraising to save the new inn is nearly complete. And while we wait to find out if there'll be a wider community pub revolution, they have come up with a specially adapted Christmas carol.
If we are able to raise the funds, we can be our pub's saviour.
We'd absolutely love to be singing the carol in the pub this Christmas with a glass in our hand, knowing that actually we've reached our target and we've secured the pub for the village.
The clinking of the champagne flutes, drunken hanging in the crowd.
And we've just heard that the locals of the new inn in Warwickshire have raised the money to buy their beloved pub. Now, if you'd like more information on tonight's programme, please visit our website at itv.com/tonight. Meanwhile, cheers, have a good evening, and thanks for watching.
Coming up next week, Fiona Foster investigates the secrets of your Christmas dinner.
So, Alex, I added everything that you ate on Christmas Day and it came to 7,040 calories.
Oh, that's a lot.
Next, we're back in Emmerdale as Gabby's rushed to hospital. Will it be all too much for Ashley? Then in half an hour here on ITV, head to the Coronation Street cobbles as Mary insists the past is behind her and Billy has a choice to make.